This is Johnny VEdmore on today's News Talk TNT.
Is the population in the West aware that a war against Iran will have much more serious consequences and will be much tougher to win than either conflicts in Iraq or Afghanistan?
It's tough to say, what the overall public, really knows about what a conflict with Iran would mean. I think to a lot of Americans, these wars haven't ended in the Middle East, but the U.S. is kind of, there's not troops. American troops aren't dying, so people don't pay attention as much. I think it might be a surprise to a lot of Americans that things are even at this point right now, that the U.S. and Iran really are at the brink of war. I think a lot of people are probably really unaware of how bad it is right now. I think, if this really does turn into something big, the U.S. bases, and especially in Iraq and Syria, there's only a few thousand troops in both those countries. They're basically sitting ducks. They come under rocket and drone attack often, but if Iran wants to hit them with their missiles, we could see a lot of American casualties. So I think, the average American might not be aware of how dangerous the situation is, but also there is an overall, I think, kind of anti-war sentiment among ordinary Americans especially when it comes to the Middle East. The idea of actually going to war with Iran, I think nobody would really want that. But the thing is, nobody gets a say. It just kind of happens. Again, there's no debate or anything about this. We got to defend Israel, even though they're attacking all these other countries. But, no question.
Yeah. How and when do you think the U.S. will intervene on behalf of Israel, like they say? Will they begin bombarding Lebanon first, or will America look to start an all-out war directly with Iran?
Well, it looks like, what they're saying they're going to do is similar to what happened in April when Iran fired missiles and drones at Israel and the U.S. intercepted most of them. Now, Iran really choreographed what it was going to do then. They said that they told the U.S. 72 hours in advance. The U.S. denied that, but Jordan and Turkey said that Iran told them. So if they told Jordan, that means the U.S. knew. So Iran gave the U.S. plenty of warning for that. Because they didn't want it to escalate. The question is, I don't know if Iran's going to do that again. It seems like they do really want to hit Israel hard. So right now, what I think the U.S. is going to do is, try to do the same thing, intercept the missiles and drones. And then the question would be, it just depends on how big things will be. If Israel, if people really start dying in Israel and they're getting attacked from Hezbollah, from Iran, then I think the U.S. would probably start doing direct strikes, on Hezbollah. I think direct strikes on Iran, I think it would take a lot to get there. And the big question is if Israel's really capable of that. And another thing to keep in mind is that Israel has nuclear weapons, and a lot of people kind of forget that because they don't officially declare it. I know it's, but a lot of people think Iran has nuclear weapons, but actually it's Israel that does. So that's something to keep in mind when we've seen what Israel's done in Gaza for the past 10 months. I don't think they would want to use nukes in Gaza or Lebanon because it's, right next door. But if they could pull off like a nuclear strike on Iran's nuclear facilities and frame it as like an attack on their nuclear weapons program, even though, as far as we know, Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapons program. But if they could frame it like that, I wouldn't be surprised to see that. It would be shocking and horrific to see nuclear weapons used, but would you really put it past Israel at this point to do something like that?
No, personally, I wouldn't. And we know from the Samson option that all of those nukes are actually aimed at European targets. So in case they go down, they want the whole world to go down with them. And it's a very strange situation we have with Israelis and their nuclear program. So, there's a lot of fear for everybody. As soon as Israel, we can see that they're basically off the leash. They're unable to be held to account by any international body, so they could do anything at this point, and that is what is very scary. And talking about the long term in Israel, if Israelis succeed in their aim to obliterate Palestine from existence, if the settlements on the West Bank expand quickly and they completely take over Gaza, will they stop there, or do you think that they are heading towards further regional expansion and the creation of the Greater Israel Project?
I think for a lot of Israelis, that is what they want. A lot of the people in power right now in the current government is that we see them even openly talking about, taking more of southern Lebanon, get Gaza, get the West Bank and then move into Lebanon. They're actually, some of them are calling for an invasion of southern Lebanon and to establish settlements there. So I think that's certainly possible. And I think, going back to the stuff with Iran, I think another big factor here, possibly motivating Netanyahu to provoke a real big war between the U.S. and Iran is, if that's happening, there's going to be way less attention on Gaza. And they'll just continue obliterating Gaza and taking it over, and then probably move on to the West Bank. I mean, and they could say, oh, Iran's funding all these, they're all in the West Bank too, so we have to kill everybody there and push them all out. And so I think that's another part of their thinking for why a big major war would benefit them, their designs on just conquering those territories.
100%. I don't think that with the international community watching the events in Palestine and Israel right now, that it is possible for them to finish that job of getting rid of the Palestinian people. They do need cover of a massive war. And those, of course, they've got settlements sprinkled all across the West Bank. Expansion of those settlements sees the West Bank disappear very quickly. Turkey has also been threatening to intervene on behalf of the Palestinians. Is that something you can see happening, or is this just rhetoric and hot air from Erdogan?
I would be surprised if, he actually did something like that. To me, right now, it seems like rhetoric, but, it was kind of interesting what he said. He said basically Turkey could intervene in Israel like it did in Libya and Nagorno-Karabakh. And in both those cases, in Libya, Turkey sent like some military advisors, but it was mostly mercenaries that he poured in there. And, same thing in Nagorno-Karabakh. Turkey denied that they did this, but there was pretty credible reporting that they were sending mercenaries from Syria. And that's something, of course, Erdogan backed Turkey really backed the effort to get rid of Assad in Syria. So maybe something like that. Like if, let's say this does break out, Hezbollah is fighting, a big war against Iran, we'll probably see militants kind of pour in from Syria and Iraq. And I'm sure, Turkey might help in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if Turkey, Iran, and Russia all end up with the same enemies, not necessarily allies, but with the same enemies, and the Western powers are drawn into further conflict on behalf of Israel, have we got a World War III on our hands?
I mean, it's tough to say. I don't think, if this turns into U.S. versus Iran in the Middle East, I'm sure Russia would support Iran with weapons and things, but I don't see them getting directly involved. China is definitely going to stay out of it. They don't have the history of being involved in conflicts. The big thing with Russia is that they do have a presence in Syria, and of course, Syria is going to be on Iran's side. So it is, that escalation risk is really there. But I would hope that it wouldn't turn into it. I like, you're looking at Russia, they're focused on Ukraine. They would probably see this as a way to bog down the U.S. in the Middle East so they could finish up what they want in Ukraine and not get involved in this big war in the Middle East. So I wouldn't expect it to turn into World War III, but you never know. World wars have started, over less.
This is Johnny VEdmore on today's News Talk TNT.